2019 in the wrestling world had a lot of buzz, especially around the early parts of the year. 2018 wasn't exactly pleasant for WWE, and outside of it, that's a different story, but whenever I think of 2018, I feel it's a huge disappointment. And it was sad too. Roman Reigns' problems forced him to leave. He had to fight a battle, but things were looking up on the road to WrestleMania. AEW was formed, which was insane at the time. Seth Rollins was going to get that push, and from out of nowhere, Kofi Kingston led the fans on a once-in-a-lifetime journey that culminated with him capturing that one elusive championship. The excitement and hype surrounding the wrestling world after WrestleMania 35 was a real thing. Of course, if you were watching WWE at the time, it faded quickly. Wild card rules, dumb stuff like Shane McMahon is the best in the world. The Miz's face turn was the worst face turn I can think of in recent years. But as always, there has to be a positive. Bray Wyatt's career up to 2019 was often looked at as a career that could have been more. His run up to this point had something to show for it though. He had a WWE title run and defended the title at WrestleMania. That's of course on paper because the circumstances were odd. This cult leader character who said a lot and nothing at the same time had run its course. There's only so many times you could reestablish a talent. But because his mind works differently, he took an entirely different route this time around. Kids show host. People were like, what the hell is this? Mr. Rogers in WWE? And the thing is, people were a bit lenient, but since Bray Wyatt delivered one hell of a performance, there was some interest. Wyatt's role as a television host made sense. He was a cult leader, and recruiting is what he did best. But his intentions this time around were very different. He made some very drastic changes to his character, and his approach was more about long-term. Because the consensus at the time was that he was still going to be his old self. It's just that he's a kid show host. Wyatt expressed regret and remorse over being a bad person in the past, but at the same time, felt that his old self was dead. To show just that, he cut a cardboard version of himself with a chainsaw. Wyatt had made mention of a secret, and a couple of weeks later, he revealed it. His insecurities of not feeling belonging caused him to create this Firefly funhouse, and at the same time, he also felt that harnessing that fear was for the best. On the July 15, 2019 episode of Raw, the Fiend made his first on-screen appearance attacking Finn Balor, and the crowd was more than excited for this new character. This attack left Finn like a deer in the headlights, but he didn't want to show it. He was really fearful of what Bray Wyatt had become, but nonetheless he issued a challenge to the Fiend for a match at SummerSlam. Wyatt, on behalf of the Fiend, accepted the match, and he praised Balor, calling him an extraordinary man, but said that the Fiend is no man. He remembers everything. In the lead up to SummerSlam, the Fiend attacked both Mick Foley and Kurt Angle, and he was building momentum. The fans were clearly into him, and SummerSlam was going to be his moment of statement. Okay, I don't think there's many debuts that are better than this. There's just not many. I'll never forget the reaction I had when watching this. So Finn comes out, all smiley, he's even dressed in white. As for Wyatt, he had this insane ass entrance. His head was essentially a lantern, signaling that he's no longer the eater of worlds. And that little spotlight that was flickering with his entrance was so damn cool. His new music playing all while the crowd's playing along. It's an emotion I don't have right now watching it, but it was truly mesmerizing and stunning. Michael Cole said, quote, "What on earth did we just witness?" And that's exactly what I thought. Finn Balor, on the other hand, was like, damn, I chose the wrong day to be regular Finn. He was a jobber on this night with Wyatt doing whatever he wanted. He did have this opening, but the Fiend was far too much, and he emerged victorious. It was really a special debut, no exaggeration, and ranks up there with the very best from the past couple of years. Finn took such a brutal beating, he ran away to NXT. Later that night, Seth Rollins faced Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship. His performance managed to win over the crowd again, and it was time for him to steer in another direction. It seemed like all was good, but little did he know. After a successful title defense against Braun Strowman, the lights went on, the fans knew what's up. Rollins knew what he was up against, but saw Hell in a Cell as a huge opportunity. Bray Wyatt, though, was glad that Rollins was okay, and the Rambling Rabbit in fear told the champion to just run. Wyatt told Rollins that he forgives, but he, the Fiend, doesn't forget, and teased an appearance tonight. And about that, yes, after putting up a picture of Rollins, he showed up. In the build-up to the match at Hell in a Cell, the Fiend was very dominant. It was very one-sided, and Rollins wasn't that confident beast slayer wherever he was, but he felt that he was walking into Hell in a Cell as champion and walking out as champion. Oh yeah, this was a thing. The hype surrounding Hell in a Cell at the time was mostly for one man and one man only, Bray Wyatt. His efforts of rebuilding his character and credibility is a testament to his talents. You don't create two successful characters without talent. He got himself to the main event of Hell in a Cell in a title match with WWE's ultimate workhorse. If you asked me before the match, 90% Bray wins. It seemed like an obvious slam dunk, and to describe this match, I'd use this image. All they have to do is pass it in. Now, of course, Wyatt probably shouldn't have been in that title scene, but since he was, it was obvious where this should have headed. But then the match happened, and for one, the light was stupid, the match sucks, but who cares? Bray's gonna become champion, right? He has too much power and made the curb stomp look stupid, which in itself was not needed. Rollins starts getting scared, he's going all out, and the referee disqualifies him, all while the fans booed and turned on the match. Like, how often do you see them turn on a match like this? It was horrible that the match ended in a DQ, a match that saw HBK take a bloody beating, Mick Foley flying all around the place, and the heat Rollins had at this point was immense, despite literally following the orders. He was literally following whatever they told him in the back, and this is what he had to show for it. He's often talking about burning it down, and as stupid as it sounds, they burned down his face run here. He was already getting some boost and they fixed it, but after this, he was finished. There was this one segment where he just ran into the Firefly Funhouse and gave Wyatt a beating. He's lashing out and Bray stands up in anger and you're thinking he's going to do something, but then he's like, why are you doing this to me? Damn, he just knew how to deliver that line. This man was a heel and he got some people feeling bad for him over here. You know, Seth Rollins is a guy, he's the babyface, this and that. This guy had more sympathy than the champion. Luckily though, they got the hint eventually in that crown jewel. The Fiend captured the Universal title in a much better match. Good job. Something that actually makes sense, because once he's in the title picture, you just have to do it, right? At the time, The Fiend was drafted to SmackDown, and he had a lot of men to face on the show. Some of these men had a storied past with him. His first order of business was to go after the new Daniel Bryan. He turned the Universal Championship blue, and Bray himself didn't know what's up with The Fiend feeling he just wants to play with Bryan. And if Daniel Bryan, wants to play, challenge for the title, he should just say that magical word. Bryan preferred to say no, and he wanted the title, but he wasn't going to say yes. The champion, though, accepted using that one magical word himself. At this point, the new Daniel Bryan still struggled to truly embrace his old self. He wasn't saying yes and had looked forward to the future, but The Fiend was basically going to lure him to the past. Their match at Survivor Series was pretty good, and for a Bray Wyatt match, it's almost an all-timer. The stupid red light was there, but everything else about it was nice. Daniel Bryan put up a much better fight, but The Fiend is The Fiend, so he retained. The champion, though, wanted to play with Bryan again. The Miz was worried that The Fiend would change him, and he agreed he would change. He was going to embrace his roots and the foundation that brought him to the main event of WrestleMania 30, the Yes Movement. Unfortunately for him, the return wasn't off to the best of starts because The Fiend ripped his hair out. Since Bryan went away, he went after The Miz in this very uninteresting feud. The thing is, Miz was already damaged as a face because of the Shane McMahon feud, but then after this, it was over. He broke into his house, played mind games, and Miz, like the ultimate jobber, lost. He didn't even put up much of a fight. And then after the match, Daniel Bryan, like his 2011, returns, and the emphasis was on how everyone Wyatt touched has changed. Finn down in NXT embraced his Prince side, Seth Rollins became the Messiah or was in the process of becoming that, and Bryan, he changed for the better. He was going to go all out in aggression to give The Fiend what he truly deserved, and he was going to do it with the Yes Movement by his side. Bryan was putting up a fight compared to others. The Fiend was actually starting to run away, but he still managed to show what he was capable of ahead of the Royal Rumble. Their scrap match was fantastic. Bryan lost his mind, wanting to tie himself to The Fiend. Why would he do that? The Rock knows why. But we don't say this often, but The Fiend actually had a great match, and I don't even mean for his standards, but in general. It was an enthralling ride that made everyone believe maybe, just maybe, the leader of the Yes Movement would eradicate and put an end to The Fiend and his title reign. Now, I'm not gonna lie, at the time the most enticing match was to see rejuvenated Daniel Bryan against Roman Reigns in the main event of WrestleMania 36. It just sounded better to me. But he won and it was clear where everything was going. That's if you saw how WWE was booking Roman Reigns. But in a turn of events, something different happened. On the February 7th, 2020 episode of SmackDown, Goldberg felt inspired to come back. He saw that Brock Lesnar was busy, so he turned his sights to the Universal Championship. Why? He's like Batista in 2007. Anytime he says title shot, you know what happens. The Fiend interrupted and Goldberg told him that he's next. On the final SmackDown before Super Showdown, Goldberg confronted the champion. For Bill, he was absolutely fearless, unlike anybody else in the past. He showed no lack of confidence, and all the other guys would be like, oh no, he's behind me. But Goldberg had a part-timer boost. He wasn't scared of anybody, and even dropped the Fiend with a spear. Their match at Super Showdown was pretty damn funny looking back. Now, I didn't personally watch Super Showdown because I thought nothing of note was going to happen. Plus, it happened in the daytime, so I was like, Fiend's going to retain, Brock Lesnar's going to retain, why should we watch? The bell rings, Goldberg drops him with a spear, and it was close. He hit him with like 4 more spears, and he still kicked out. But then he finds himself in the mandible claw, but Goldberg catches up and hits this ugly-ass jackhammer, which some people believe that Wyatt sandbagged to win the title. What a turn of events, and I remember moments after the show concluded, seeing this image was a shocker. And for some reason, it was kind of funny. To see this man go through Finn Balor, Seth Rollins, whose face run was ruined for this, The Miz, Daniel Bryan, only for him to lose to Goldberg. Most WWE thing ever. Now, there's a couple of problems with this. He was supposed to be this big champion who loses in a huge moment, but then he loses to a part-timer who's not around. Would I have done it that way? No. But I ain't the booker. Why would they do it though? Well, looking at the numbers for SmackDown that month, Goldberg's appearances were a hit. They probably reacted to that, and in addition, Roman Reigns hadn't been in the main event scene. The reason why I mentioned this is that it was clear that Roman was returning to the main event scene, and to a casual fan, Goldberg versus Roman Reigns sounds more enticing, I assume. Plus, Roman was probably going to be booed at WrestleMania if the event went on as planned. Wouldn't it have been far worse if he beat the Fiend in the main event? I mean, at the end of the day, it was always going to be Roman Reigns holding the title. With that said, one thing I loved about this mini feud is that Goldberg looked absolutely fearless and no-sold everything the Fiend did, and in kayfabe, that was his key to victory. All the other guys had some semblance of fear towards the Fiend, but he just goes in, does the work, and wins. I still want to have him win the match though. At the time, reports circulated that Goldberg played politics and convinced the guys to have him win the title. Everyone rolled with it because, rumors, and it seemed far-fetched because even though Bret Hart curses Goldberg, we don't really hear others talk bad about him, and it's certainly never about his attitude backstage. Here's what he had to say in an interview with Shaq Wrestling. And I quote, "Let's put it this way. I've never said anything that wasn't true in the wrestling business. I'm a talent, and I do what the boss tells me to do. I flew to Saudi Arabia knowing I was going to lose, and then somehow it changed and the finish was different. It surely wasn't me because it's an extremely selfish move to do. Number 2, truly it wouldn't be about the business, it would be about myself. Number 3, who the hell am I as a part-time guy to come in and demand anything? Truly I'm not. Vince gave me opportunities that maybe I didn't deserve in the past. I owe that man just about everything," he explained. "First and foremost, I've never said no to putting anybody over. Maybe back in WCW, I didn't agree with putting Chris Jericho over or something like that. And if I can remember correctly, because I didn't think it was time for the character Goldberg to be involved in any comedy. But not in a million years in that Fiend situation in Saudi Arabia would I have done that. No way in hell. I'd love to see him face to face and make sure there is not 1% of his being that believes that I changed the match," Goldberg said. "That's the first time I've actually been able to defend myself in this situation." This is not me being a Goldberg shill, but the story sounded odd. McMahon's just gonna succumb to his demands like that? Like, doesn't he book the show? He probably already thought of the perks of having Goldberg champion. That said, for the Fiend, it all worked out, I'd say, because the next night on SmackDown, John Cena was without an opponent for WrestleMania. The Fiend thought, why don't I fix that problem? Okay, this is nice. John Cena, who almost never shows up, is facing the Fiend. They have a history, in particular at WrestleMania, so this should be good. Hopefully, because Bray Wyatt's not really that interesting in ring. The Fiend's reasoning for challenging John Cena is because he doesn't forgive John Cena. Bray Wyatt may have, but he, the Fiend, didn't. He played a part in his failure and in turn created the Fiend. Then afterwards, COVID happened and everything changed. There was this huge amount of uncertainty at the time, and WWE, of course, had to go on without crowds. Cena saw Wyatt's failures as it coming down to him not being as hard-working as him, and he said that everyone blames him, but they can't even work through half of his schedule. John saw WrestleMania as the opportunity to end the overhyped, overrated Bray Wyatt. Why? For the future of WWE. It was going to open the door of opportunities for the likes of McIntyre, Ciampa, and Velveteen Dream. Oh man. Bray Wyatt interrupted and let Cena know that he broke him. It was real bad because of the voices in his head, but he let him in. He let those voices in, and he said that WrestleMania was going to be a slaughter. Bray later on issued a Firefly Funhouse match to Cena for WrestleMania, and he accepted. Despite the uncertainty, Cena didn't really entertain the thought because it could lead to fear and collapse. That's how Bray Wyatt found success in WWE. Why would he be scared of someone who isn't even on the level below him? Goldberg exposed that the Fiend has a weakness. He's going to expose him all around. Now, in some ways, it's like this whole thing never happened. Because of the circumstances, it's like the Fiend and John Cena never even faced off at WrestleMania. What it turned out to be was probably much better than what would have happened with the crowds. It's a lot to unpack, but to put it simply, Bray Wyatt's failures brought him to the breaking point. In front of him was the poster child for the man who was handed every chance. In his eyes, he believed that John Cena was spoiled, he was privileged, this and that. It's like he got into Cena's mind and showed him a world where he turned heel, embraced the hate, and it's all cracked up, honestly. Like, I can't really explain it. It's hard to talk about. Barring the NWO Cena, the best part for me was when Wyatt used Cena's words against him and said, quote, "At WrestleMania, I'm going to end the career of the most overhyped, overrated, overprivileged wrestler in history." In some ways, that also felt like the end of John Cena, but ended up not being. And if there was ever a time to turn him heel, it could have been after this match, because as we know, The Fiend changes people. It's definitely the most iconic match from this run, and it showed that The Fiend was vulnerable after losing to Goldberg, and even he needed a rebound, as dangerous, as violent, as dominant as he was. He saw WrestleMania 30 as his biggest insecurity, and in pursuit of righting that wrong, he also wanted to expose John Cena for who he truly is. That's what I could take from this match. It's hard to explain. Following WrestleMania, Bray Wyatt felt that he should reclaim his title. Unfortunately for him, Braun Strowman was willing to let him in. It was an interesting story because similar to almost everyone else Bray feuded with, he had a past with them. And in particular, Braun Strowman was one closest to Bray Wyatt. The former champion was all about mind games, whereas Strowman was straightforward. For Wyatt, he said that he knew what Strowman was capable of because he created him. The feud was very, very different to everything else, and it all came down to Bray Wyatt wanting Strowman by his side and the title on his waist. Braun, though, saw that he went far without Bray by his side and felt that the partnership was a thing in the past. Their match at Money in the Bank was bizarre. I don't really remember much of it, but apparently Braun played Wyatt with a mask to retain the title. Since his efforts of recruiting Strowman and regaining the title went terribly, Wyatt resorted to a different means of getting what he wants. He brought back the Eater of Worlds. It was all about embracing his roots, and in pursuit of the title and bringing out the true nature of his old friend, he was going to bring Braun Strowman to where it all began, the swamp. He provided Strowman a home, a family, and gave him purpose. And now he's got to take him out because he wants the title. Their match at Extreme Rules was something. It was a swamp match, and watching it, damn, WWE was on Freestyle in 2020. Alexa Bliss showed up in some flashbacks wearing a scarf saying that her and Braun could be together forever, and Braun, despite what he was facing, turned out to be the victor, but deep in the sea lied Bray Wyatt's dark side. The Fiend. He went after Alexa Bliss, and unlike everyone else, she embraced him. Strowman, though, on the other hand, saw Extreme Rules as the night where he turned into the most sadistic SOB, and once again, the Fiend is known for changing people. He did just that for Strowman, who showed no regard or worry towards Alexa Bliss. He accepted Wyatt's challenge for SummerSlam, and the relationship between those two was a very touchy one for Bliss at this point, who was trying her very best to fix things, even if it meant slapping some sense into him. This didn't work, and out of everyone to come to her rescue, it was the Fiend. The feud was weird as hell. It was basically Braun Strowman showing his true colors, and he beat up Bray Wyatt to the point where he forced out the Fiend. Their match at SummerSlam was cracked up. Some wild stuff, but by the end, Bray Wyatt regained the Universal Championship. Then to top it all off, Roman Reigns returned with so much vengeance and anger. He dropped everyone, told Strowman that he made him, and said that the Fiend was a freak in a mask. For Roman, his attitude changed drastically, so you know what that meant. The relationship between Alexa Bliss and the Fiend was clear as day at this point. She embraced him. Bliss's look changed slightly to fit in line with the Firefly Funhouse, and Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, was drafted to Raw. His first order of business was targeting a man whose past was synonymous with his. If anything, Orton was most responsible for bringing the Fiend to life. Alexa Bliss invited him to a moment of bliss, and he knew damn well where this was leading. Nikki Cross, meanwhile, was desperately trying to bring Bliss back, but it didn't work at all. For Orton, he knew what the Fiend was capable of and shared similarities, saying he likes suppressing his anger to fit in. And the voices the Fiend hears are his. Orton reminded Bliss of how he found Bray Wyatt's vulnerability and burned it to the ground, and that's what he has to do now. He has to find the Fiend's weakness. It didn't take him long to find it, and Bliss didn't want Orton to think he knew everything and said, well, who's manipulating who? The Fiend came out, and Orton no-sold it similar to Goldberg, but this is where he panicked a bit. Shortly afterwards, it was confirmed that Randy Orton was going to face the Fiend at TLC. As for tonight, he wanted Bray Wyatt in a match. That match happens, he gives him a beating, but when it came time to go for the cover, the Fiend respawned. The storyline was rooted in mind games, and Orton had to respond. He assaulted Bray the following week and threw him into a cargo box, and the man set him on fire, but then the Fiend just emerged from out of nowhere and locked him in the mandible claw. Their match at TLC was a Firefly Inferno match, and it's always Randy Orton who's in these situations. Never John Cena or someone else, it's Orton. What's even more shocking than this match happening is the fact that Orton's wearing pants. This man probably hasn't worn pants since like 2008. This one was just a fight, a way of surviving, and it was insane. Bray caught fire, and Orton the Madman dropped him with an RKO, and he showed remorse, but then realized he's a legend killer, and I don't know if he was seeking forgiveness, but he looked up to the heavens and doused the Fiend in gasoline before setting him on fire. 2009, Randy is insane, but did he burn somebody? This version of Orton destroyed Edge, RKO'd his wife, dropped Ric Flair, and now burned the Fiend. He was proud of his actions and acknowledged his enjoyment of turning the Fiend into char. The voices in his head he embraced were now gone after burning the Fiend, and Orton found joy in taking him out. Instead of the Fiend coming out, it was Alexa Bliss. She made jokes out of Bray Wyatt, saying he's probably out tanning, eating barbecue, and she gave a visual of last night and said that he's home. She said that if he ever comes back to Alexa's playground, it'll be like nothing Orton's seen before. The Legend Killer took advantage of the funhouse being empty and wanted to see what's up. The characters on the show were lifeless. Orton was turning the room to a mess and threatened the Fiend, saying that if he does come back, he's gonna show him how sick he truly is by ruining everything, so when he returns, he has nothing to come back to. Alexa was losing and challenged him to a match in the main event, and Orton's expectation was he's returning. Later that night, Alexa poured gasoline all over herself, telling Orton to do what he did to her. Bro, all this for a man that doesn't have work rate? She was provoking him hard, and I'm shocked it took the arsonist this long. He said that he wants to do it, but since she wants it, he has to process this for a bit. After a while, he was like, you want a Fiend in hell? I'll give it to you. He didn't though and hated himself for it. That said, Orton also saw this as a moment of reflection, and it also helped him learn that he is capable of anything. When Charlie asked him if he believes the Fiend would come back, he didn't want to talk about it. His worries at this point were with legends, and in particular, Triple H. So Alexa Bliss reminded him of what he did by blasting him with a fireball. This left Orton in a dark place, and it was in the worst possible time. With his facing this traumatic experience, he regrets showing compassion to Alexa Bliss. He was thankful that the agony he was in was not as bad as it truly could have been, and his face could have been disfigured, but even with all his turmoil and his hatred towards Alexa Bliss, he didn't blame her. He blamed the Fiend, but pushing that aside, his intention was clearly on the Royal Rumble. This is a very different and unique promo that one was accustomed to. The fact that they allowed him to talk about this dark moment in such a unique environment and position was nice. It was a very standout promo in Orton's career, I'd say, because of how different everything was. The fact that he was wearing the mask, this and that. But as for Alexa, he cost her the Raw Women's Championship with an RKO, and apparently he healed in like a week, which was dumb. Then again, he's Randy Orton, who knows? She returned the favor, costing him his match with Edge, and she was singing the praises of the Fiend and promised he will be reborn. To make matters worse, Orton was eliminated first in the Elimination Chamber. Why? He blamed it all on distractions, and he took care of the Fiend, so what now? Alexa Bliss. That's what it came down to. Orton's worries and paranoia was all down to one woman, and it wasn't like she cost him the match. He was distracted mentally. And then he threw up black stuff. Why? I don't know. He warned her to stay out of the way, otherwise there'll be no compassion. His own message was being used against him as a teaser for the Fiend, and Alexa Bliss was constantly teasing Orton with what's to come. Once again, he was coughing black stuff, and boom! AJ Styles is the Styles Clash to win. Alexa Bliss even went as far as to challenge Randy Orton to a match at Fastlane. Right before the match, he began coughing up the black stuff, and he was more than pissed, and he was ready to fight. He was ready to beat up Alexa Bliss. Even she had to wrestle in the dark. Orton couldn't really do anything because Bliss was throwing fire. She was luring him to the outside where stuff was falling from the heavens. And to top it all off, he returned. This man was burned into char in Samoa Joe's commentary. The moment he said he was ugly was so damn hilarious. The Fiend, his sister Abigail, and Alexa Bliss beat him. Okay, this is remembered for the wrong reasons. It was a John Cena WrestleMania 34 situation. But anyways, Randy Orton called out the Fiend on Raw. He was planning on burning him yet again because why not? He's the arsonist Randy Orton. He ended up taking yet another beating after the Fiend played him. And these two, their intentions were clear. They wanted Randy Orton at WrestleMania. So for months, Randy Orton, the Viper, the Apex Predator, the Legend Killer, would often have to look behind his back. Alexa's every move was getting to Orton, and even though he didn't want to admit it, he knew that sooner or later, the Fiend would come back. For Bray Wyatt, his household was burned down by this very same man. He ruined his family and led him to the very path of darkness that brought out the Fiend. WrestleMania was the time for him to pay for his sins. The Fiend was restored to his normal self, and looking at this, it really looked like it was going to be Chapter 3 of The Fiend. The match sucked though, no sugarcoating it, but it was going the way I expected it to. But then Alexa Bliss had black stuff dripping over her, and Orton drops the Fiend with an RKO to win. The hell? Okay, this was funny as hell. A story which was going to culminate the way everyone expected it to, with Orton finally losing, ends with him winning. Huh? It's just the way things are. I didn't really care for the story. I was mostly indifferent to it. But in terms of moments, it's probably the best in the Fiend's run. And the crazy part is, he wasn't really that involved with it. It was Randy Orton and Alexa Bliss who developed and brought the story to WrestleMania 37 in Tampa, Florida. And after WrestleMania, Bray disappeared. Some thought he was still processing the death of Brody Lee. Others thought it was a part of the story. And personally, I was the latter. I actually thought that he would return when the crowds would. Hell, I thought the Fiend versus Bobby Lashley would happen. But then he got released for what was cited as budget cuts. Huh? The guy that won the Universal Championship twice, faced Randy Orton at WrestleMania, was released because of budget cuts? I mean, they did release Braun Strowman, but this one was a bit weird to me. It had to be a couple of reasons, not a single one. Why I was often criticizing the booking his character was receiving, and McMahon wasn't really fond towards him by WrestleMania 37, and they cut their losses. Personally, I guess it came down to a couple of things. The Fiend, he made millions, no doubt about it, but I also believe that he was seen as a target because of it. He's not in the best relationship with the company, he wasn't wrestling often, and if the salary is true, $3 million, they thought 2 birds with 1 stone. It's still weird because he's a top merch seller, so who knows what the true exact reasons are. The Fiend's run was something. Personally, I didn't like the idea of a wrestler who was far too powerful on the roster. He's far too powerful, but I guess that's a part of his charm to some. Anytime somebody mentions the possibility of the Fiend losing, it's a problem, and it's hard to book somebody like that. You know, Seth Rollins could lose, hell, even Brock Lesnar, but the Fiend can't really lose. He loses with 1 or 2 curb stomps. He's the same as everyone else on the roster, and people were talking about how he shouldn't be near the title when it was bound to happen. You know, even The Undertaker and Kane held titles. People want to see their favorites win titles, and the Fiend, as popular as he was, people weren't going to complain that he wasn't challenging for titles. I don't believe that. That said, I like this run as Universal Champion where he's feuding with Dan O'Brien. It was well done. Things weren't overly crazy, and we got to see a lot of Funhouse Bray as well. As for him losing to Goldberg, he wouldn't be my first, second, or third choice. I always thought it would be Roman, and if not, probably someone that can actually rival the Fiend, like the Demon Finn Balor. I guess what it comes down to is perhaps the Fiend should come out occasionally, like Mankind with Cactus Jack, something that pushes Bray to the point where he lets him in, or he needed just some sort of weakness, because it's not good if he loses all the time or vice versa. I thought there was a lot of optimism for Chapter 2 of The Fiend. He destroyed John Cena mentally and was off to a feud with Strowman. That turned out to be it. It was wild as hell, though. And to top it all off, the feud with Randy Orton did not help him at all. He gets burned, comes back, and loses. It was never going to work for Bray Wyatt. It was always going to end badly with the way they were booking him. He wasn't going to be satisfied. If he were to return, I expect him to return as The Fiend, because returning otherwise would be financially irresponsible. The Fiend makes cash, and I do hope he evolves into something else that, like the original Bray, allows for the Fiend to return in some matches. Another aspect to mention is that Bray Wyatt isn't really that entertaining in ring. He's got the character, this and that, but when the bell rings, I lose a little interest. But if he returns, I hope all is well. I hope they don't jump the shark with his character or anything like that. They really stuck themselves in some very odd positions with the Fiend, positions which would hurt either him or the guy he was facing. Hell, some situations where both men were hurt. Perhaps if he returns, Alexa Bliss will probably be paired with him again, or perhaps there will be a feud between the two. With that said, the Fiend had a crazy run. Alright, what did you guys think of the Fiend's run? Please comment down below. And that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the Uranagi on the like button, or perhaps the Sister Abigail on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.